Why God told Israel to separate the technology they embodied. Peace to the remnant. Today I'm teaching something that has been hidden in plain sight. Something that explains why God told Israel to separate from the nations. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Israel wasn't separated because they were better. Israel was separated because they were different. They embodied something the nations were trying to imitate with external tools, external systems, and external technology. And the key that unlocks all of this is Jeremiah 3:16. God says, they will no longer say, the ark of the covenant of the Lord. It will not come to mind. It will not be remembered. It will not be made again. Now ask yourself, why would God say that? Why would God tell Israel that the very object that defined their identity, their power, their authority, their covenant, would no longer be needed? Because the ark was never the goal. The ark was the training wheels. The ark was the external version of what the people themselves were supposed to become. Let me say that again. The ark was the external version of what the people themselves were supposed to become. Look at the materials. The ark was acacia wood, an insulator, covered inside and out with pure gold, a conductor, topped with a solid gold lid, a capacitor plate, carried with poles, insulation from discharge, surrounded by strict handling rules because it was dangerous. That's not symbolism. That's engineering. That's function. That's design. But Jeremiah 3:16 says, the day would come when the people wouldn't need the ark anymore. Why? Because the people themselves would become the carriers of the covenant, the carriers of the presence, the carriers of the authority. Now let's go deeper. Israel carried stones, not jewelry, identity. Each stone engraved with the tribe, each stone set in gold. Each stone placed over the heart of the priest. These stones weren't decoration. They were the external expression of internal identity. The nations had idols. Israel had identity. The nations had statutes. Israel had stones. The nations had symbols. Israel had covenant. And look at the metals. Gold, silver, copper, brass, bronze. These metals weren't chosen for beauty. They were chosen for what they do. Gold reflects and stabilizes. Silver conducts. Copper purifies. Brass ionizes. Bronze withstands heat. These were not symbolic choices. These were functional choices. These were covenant material. Now look at the menorah. Pure gold. 7 lamps. Pure pressed oil. A reflective chamber. That's not a household lamp. That's a precision light system. That's controlled illumination. That's engineered efficiency. And yet God says, you are the light of the world. The menorah was the external version. The people were the internal version. Now look at Elijah. He didn't need a device to call fire. He didn't need a machine to stop the rain. He didn't need technology to outrun a chariot. Creation responded to him because he was a lion. He was an embodied ark. Look at Joshua. He didn't need a cosmic device to stop the sun. He spoke, and creation obeyed. Why? Because he was a lion. He was an embodied ark. Look at Jesus. He didn't need tools to calm storms, multiply food, or heal bodies. He was the living ark, the living covenant, the living presence. And this is why God told Israel to separate, because they embodied internally what the nations tried to build externally. The nations built idols. Israel carried identity. The nations built temples. Israel was the temple. The nations built weapons. Israel had trumpets and covenant authority. The nations built power systems. Israel had the cloud by day and the fire by night. Everything the nations built with machines, Israel carried as identity. Everything the nations built with metal, Israel carried in their bodies, their garments, their covenant. This is why God said, "Come out from among them and be separate." Not because Israel was superior, but because Israel was different. Israel was designed to function from the inside out, not the outside in. Jeremiah 3:16 is a graduation moment. God says, "You won't need the ark anymore." Why? Because the people become the ark. The covenant moves from object to identity, from container to carrier, from technology to embodiment. This is why the nations today build machines, grids, networks, and systems. They are trying to replace what Israel lost. Embodied authority, embodied identity, embodied covenant. But the remnant is waking up. The remnant is remembering. The remnant is returning to the original design. Israel was separated because they embodied what the nation tried to imitate. And the remnant today is stepping back into that same identity. Not through machines, not through symbols, but through alignment, obedience, and covenant. This is the teaching. This is the restoration. This is the return. Peace to the remnant.